What's going on, Hosey? You doing all right?
No, I'm actually having a hard time,
Are you?
bro. Just teasing you.
It's funny, man. It's funny, dude. No, but seriously, you guys are good with all the fires and everything?
Yeah. There was one that was like 2 months ago where that one actually started in Somis, which is where I live.
Mhm.
Um, that one was a lot closer proximity. This one's like maybe like an hour and 30 minutes away, but man, like it it was I seen some like the devastation that happened after the fact, man. I think I in our area, I think there was like 50 to 60 homes that burned down,
Wow.
structures in LA, 10,000, bro.
That's wild. I'm getting
That's
ready
in,
to hop on a call a little bit after this with Angel, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about in terms of because he's in LA and in
yeah.
terms of like how that kind of is going down and how that could potentially affect agents and real estate and things of that nature. So,
It actually helps the real estate market, just so you know.
talk a little bit about that, bro.
So a lot of real estate is supply and demand, meaning that right now we have 10,000 displaced people that had a home that no longer have a home. These people are either going to go into the rental market or the purchase market. Um, Meaning that as these people start to find other types of housing, it's like imagine adding, let's say you have a demand of $2,000, 2,000 homes per year. Imagine adding a demand of 10,000 homes per year. So now what ends up happening with the rental market, it starts to little by little start to dry out.
Mm.
Then what happens with the purchase inventory is little by little, it starts to dry out as well too. Now, what I believe is that it's actually going to trickle down to Ventura County as well too. So our county is neighbors to LA County. What I believe is going to happen is that for some of these people that were homeowners in some of these areas is that if they go into other parts of LA, um, they're not going to be able to find what they want at the price that they want.
Mm.
We're neighbors. So our market is actually in between LA and Santa Barbara, and our market is a substantially lower price than LA to Santa Barbara. Meaning like you want to get some of the homes that burned down that were $20 million on the ocean. In our market, you can get that for $5 million.
Mm.
It's almost like a little bit like Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Sure.
I imagine that properties in Miami are higher price in Fort Lauderdale,
Mhm.
but you can still, so you get a lot more bang for your buck. So I believe that, not only do I believe, but I've seen it happen because this is like the third or fourth fire that we've kind of experienced. And I've seen what happens to the inventory after that. And the inventory starts to contract. Some of the people are in a financial position to be able to do it like immediately because they got the financial resources to do it. So you're going to see it a little bit at the beginning, but when it's really going to start to play an effect is when the insurance money starts to come in.
And then when the insurance money starts to come in, now people have options and choices. And what you're saying is because you've seen it a couple times where that'll cause people, and they're not all collectively talking to each other, but it'll just cause people naturally to come to the same conclusion, which is like, hey, if we're going to stay in this geographic area, if we just go to like Ventura County or Camarillo or whatever, we're still here and it's significantly less money as compared to where we were
100%.
before.
Yeah, well, I think that the other options that they're going to be looking at is other areas like Santa Barbara. They're going to be looking at maybe like Manhattan Beach, but there's not a lot of inventory in those areas. And it's similar price. And we're like almost like we're in the middle of LA and Santa Barbara. And in our areas for a $5 million budget, you can get like oceanfront on the sand, basically, which is insane
Yeah, so
in comparison to
for
some of these
you,
areas.
just out of kind of the dumb luck of geographic location, you see that actually causing
Helping or
increase in
benefiting.
demand and increasing prices over time, but it still
Yeah.
doesn't deal with the fact of there being meaningfully kind of inventory constraints.
Yeah, it actually makes the inventory lower both on the rental market and on the purchase market. But even with the last fire, like, so with the last fire, the one that started in Somas, we have a listing in Somas right now that's $3 million. Out of the showings that we've had, almost 50% of them were people that were fire victims. Basically.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So like, it's not just that you are saying this from theory,
No,
from
I'm
actual
experiencing it.
like data, like, yo, this is where they're coming from.
Yeah, and not only that, but like my neighbor across the street, her mom lost the home and she bought a property through us and she was a fire victim. So when I first, like, if you had asked me this question in 2017, I would have had no concrete data as to how to answer this. But because we've experienced this a couple times now, and obviously we're active because of the amount of volume that we do, we have a very good pulse on what happens to the marketplace. Not only that, I talked to other brokers. I was just at a curiosity. I had a listing coming up in a certain neighborhood. I called the broker. I said, "Hey, look, what are you guys in escrow at? Like, we have a very, or what are you guys closing at? We have a very similar property to that's coming on the market." I'm like, "Hey, look, your price seems kind of high." And what he told me was, "Look, just so you know, the buyer came through of somebody who lost their home through the fire as well too." So not only like am I experiencing it, but I basically am experiencing it through other conversations with other brokers. But here's the thing. And part of the reason why it's going to help out the rental market and the purchase market, and a lot of people don't realize this, when their property burns down, they actually don't know how complex the building process is in California. And I think this is where Newsom's going to get some major heat, bro, from now the most recent fire, because I've had conversations with people like, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to rebuild in the next year."
And
Like
you're like,
the contract,
nope, it's not gonna happen.
they're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, and you know this because you've done, kind of construction and things of that nature and had to deal with all the permits and whatnot. It's funny you say that because there was uh, a guy, I think he's Adam Carolla. He
Mm-hmm.
used to be on TV or whatever, but he's a Californian, and his take on it was like, yeah, in that specific area, there's a lot of people that perhaps are for kind of that are very like liberal,
Yeah,
in their thought process and kind of political affiliation. And he was saying like, yeah, what's going to happen is they're going to push up against all the bureaucracy, and that's going to cause a lot of friction because
100%.
they've never experienced it before.
No, they never experienced how all this overregulation basically makes it a lot more complicated. I'll give you an example. Like in 2017, when the Thomas fire hit, people were like, "Oh yeah," like even the city came out and said, we're gonna expedite your guys' permits, bro." So I got to see when the houses were actually finished, meaning like when the houses were finished, it was 3 to 4
It was,
years
bro.
before they got their permits, not before they started construction, before they got their permits
So
on an expedited process.
that's crazy. So, I mean, it's interesting because to your point, there's a certain segment of the population who has resources that can just purchase a new home, but that's not everybody.
Yeah.
And
No.
the other issue that it is still kind of percolating underneath is the issue of kind of supply and demand. So, like you're saying, like, yeah, it'll help with demand. The problem is we still have restricted supply. So all that really means is that like the average home in Ventura or in Camarillo is going to be like $1 million. Like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. So it's funny because the neighbor that I had, because we've already experienced a couple fires, she actually came to me and said, "Jose," she asked me some of the questions. She's like, "What's your opinion?" And then she gave me her opinion. And her opinion was this, and it's true. She said, "I actually want to buy now because I have the financial capability before the insurance money starts to come in, because I believe that once the insurance money comes in, um, the inventory will become more
Yeah.
restrictive, and I want to get ahead of those people basically before they get." Now, there's additional problems with this too, man. Like, and I haven't dug fully into it, but they're talking about like how a lot of insurance policies in LA were canceled like within the last 3 months,
Yeah.
and a decent amount of the people in Pacific Palisades had no proper insurance.
Like a lot.
So
Something
what
like
happens?
one of the major insurers there, it was like 70% of the people that they dropped were in the Pacific Palisades, like specifically.
So imagine that you get dropped by your insurance company. Maybe your house is paid off. You're like, oh yeah, I got time to basically like re-up it. Like holidays are here. I'm just gonna do it at the beginning of the year. Fire starts, and during a fire, nobody insures during a fire in that geographic area. So you can, like, if a fire breaks out, you can't call an insurance company and be like, hey, I want to get insurance. No, it's like, okay, blocked off.
Yeah, and what I also think is really interesting is that, you know, insurance companies are really in the business of mitigating risk.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine at that scale the amount of data that they are combing through in order to make the decision about risk mitigation. And what I find is interesting is like people can externally, you know, have conversations about and kind of pontificate or give theories. They go based on data and they're completely unemotional about it. So when they look at that data and they're like, dude, there's a high probability. I see the same thing in Florida where, you know what I mean? People can get like, like, I don't know if this is like real or maybe this is hocus pocus or like, I don't know about water level or whatever. Well, in Miami, in certain areas, like they won't give you insurance. And you have to ask yourself, like, these are,
why is that?
Yeah, why is that? Like, you know, your question, like how you always ask yourself, you're like, is this true? It's like, well, how are they coming to that conclusion? And if they're like these major corporations that have a, they have a mandate, you know, to make a profit, so they got to be mitigating risk properly, and they're coming to this conclusion. And systematically, whether it be on coastlines or in California or in areas that are prone to having these types of natural disasters happen, they're just basically saying like, look, like it's not worth the risk. You know, I think it's interesting because I took a trip last year and I booked it before this hurricane came through. And you know, it's funny. I talked to Angel. He's like, because he's thinking about like, where would I be geographically? And I'm like, what about Florida, bro? It'd be dope. We could hang out, play pickleball, and then we'll get Jose over. And he was like, I don't know. You guys have like all these hurricanes. And I was like, bro, you guys have fires like all the time. Like, what are you talking about? Right.
And earthquakes.
Yeah. And earthquakes and like all this stuff. And he's like, well, don't you get like hurricane damage every year? I'm like, no, you know, just like you guys don't get hit by fires every year, specifically to you, but they do happen regularly. But anyway, I took this trip and I booked it in advance before this big storm came and hit the west coast of Florida. And the Airbnb wouldn't let me like cancel it. So they were like, you got to come. So I waited, you know, postponed it until they could get it ready and operational and everything. And then I went, but I told Carla, like while we were there, it's like, I feel like I shouldn't be here. Because there were like piles of wreckage. And in fact, I bumped into a guy who was like, his thing was right on the ocean. And, you know, just as a reflex, I just asked him, because that's like a kind thing to do. Like, hey, how you doing? And he was like, well, do you see what's going on here? I was like, hey man, is it okay if I give you a hug? Because he started crying. I gave him a hug and then he started talking to me, you know, and he owned it for like 25 years or whatever. And his parents like lived on the island and they, you know, his kids had come and it really served him well. And I'm sure he made a lot of money over time. So I just helped, you know, kind of lent this perspective. And I'm not suggesting this is true in California, but like, I'm just sharing my experience with this individual. I was like, well, you know, it served you really well. And, you know, you're just giving like a little bit of the money back, you know, like that's what's happening over time, but you have great memories, like all that stuff. But as I'm walking up and down the beach there, all of these beautiful homes that are on the sand are just like blown out. You know what I'm saying? Like everything's blown in, furniture's all like strewed around. There's big piles of debris. And I said to Carla, like, you know, it's interesting because what's happening is in those areas, you know, as humans, like, I think we like what we like. And, you know, we also don't like to be kind of told what to do sort of thing. And I told her, like, what I think what we're experiencing is like this, it's a different form of gentrification where now in Florida, in those areas, The only people that like the mom and pops, they're not going to, they can't do it anymore because the cost of insurance is too high and like all that other stuff. And in the future, Jose, all of those homes are going to need to be on stilts that are probably 14, 15 feet off the ground for storm surge. But only a very infinitesimally small portion of the population can afford to buy the home that's destroyed, tear it down, build it up on stilts. You know what I'm saying? So it's either corporations or really like uber wealthy individuals, like 0.01%, that'll even be able to live in those geographic areas anymore. And we're witnessing that, like, you know, we see it in Florida. I see it over there. And I see the ramifications of it because in our two states, what I'm seeing happening in the condo market in Florida is that the cost of insurance is like, it's exploding. And simultaneously, they have this law where we had a building. It was a terrible disaster. Like in Miami, like it just crumbled and all these people passed away. It was horrible. But it's because like they were postponing doing, doing work. And they just kept postponing and postponing and postponing. And then that happened. So they passed a law where this year condos have to have full reserves. And they always vote to not have full reserves because they don't want their dues to go up. So now what's happening is the dues have doubled, huge special assessments, and insurance is going up. So I predict,
which affects prices.
Oh, bro, I predict with and you've seen the inventory explode, like double for condos. So I've been telling everybody, I'm like, dude, I predict
get out of the condo space.
Yeah, I would
get into the single family space versus a condo
with like a super high degree of probability. I see that those values going down dramatically because of what we're describing.
Not only that, but like with condo associations, because I own a building in a condo association and they wanted me to be part of the board and potentially even president, but I couldn't stand the politics.
I know, it's terrible.
I could not.
It's horrible, dude. It's the worst.
Not only that, but the people that were making the decisions, a lot of them aren't very financial savvy. So like they wanted to spend $15,000 on a palm tree because they had extra money in the account. And I sat there and I'm like, guys, just because we have money in the account, that doesn't mean that you got to spend $15,000 on a palm tree. Yep. I'm like, what you need to do is instead of spending $15,000 on a palm tree, is this will help us when an issue comes up, because over time, something will come up. There will be an issue. I guarantee you. And because you're not preparing and you're mismanaging the funds, when that issue comes up, the only options that you're going to have is some sort of special assessment, which is going to increase the dues, which is going to affect the prices for the neighborhood. Yep. The lower the HOA fees, the more a buyer can afford to buy in that community. The higher the HOA fees, the lower. Now, this is something that people need to consider whenever buying condos or townhomes or things that are managed through an HOA. You have to be very selective of which HOAs you get into, because if you get into the wrong HOAs, your investment can be hurt tremendously.
Yeah, agreed. 100%.
By mismanagement of people that don't really have financial
and it's not
literacy.
It's not a paid position, and they're managing a gigantic budget. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like $500,000, $1 million budget, and like nobody has any business background or financial background. And how they end up making decisions is emotionally, not practically or logically. So I do think it's interesting. It does have effects on our kind of, the business of selling real estate in terms of affordability.
Yeah.
In terms of getting financing. Because 93% of the population gets a mortgage, so they have to have insurance on their property. Mm-hmm. Versus those who pay cash, who can go forego it and kind of self-insure. So I guess the question is like, for agents that are in areas, whether it's in California or in other areas that are experiencing similar things, like what are some intentional and purposeful things that you can do to continue to serve, the community? I think it's funny. One of Angel's guys, he's coming to the summit that we're doing. I talked to him yesterday on a live stream, and we were talking about media, because I did a thing for EXP University where they asked me to teach about media, and I live streamed it so on Instagram. So he was there kind of watching, and then I pulled him in, and he's like, "Yeah, bro, like, uh, what I'm doing is like I talk about myself and like how I serve the community and blah blah blah." I'm like, "Hey, do you notice who you're talking about?" He was like, "What?" I'm like, "You're talking about you." And let me ask you a question, because they're in LA. Yeah. I'm like, let me ask you a question. Like, do you have any clients or anybody that could have been affected by like this situation? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, all right, well, what do those people want to know about? They want to know about programs. They want to know about what's available to them. They want to know about other options. Maybe for those who have resources, like here is inventory that's available right now. If they were in this community, what would be similar to that community in Oxnard or in Camarillo or in Simi Valley? You know what I mean? Like, so really getting clear on what they would be interested in and then provide it to them, and do that via a platform that allows you to be able to scale that, where as many people as possible can watch it, with the goal and objective of being helpful to them in some way, versus
Yeah.
instead like, hey, here's what I'm doing and I'm so cool, and here's all the reasons why you should have me help.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and it's funny because uh, obviously there's been a lot more fires in California,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just been like the nature of the beast. Um, what do you think the solution is to prevent the fires? Like a lot of people are saying, well, like there should have been more water there. There should have been like better systems or just different things, right?
Yeah.
What do you think the solution is to actually prevent the fires,
That's a really
if anything?
Yeah, I think that whenever things happen that are bad, our tendency as humans is to look for someone or something to place the blame. And I think when we're talking about, and again, I mean this lovingly, like if anybody's watching this who knows anybody who may have been affected in some way, uh, my intention is not to be like compassionate and understanding and tolerant, and try to send them good energy and perhaps resources to help them. But to answer your question, um, I think the issue, there's definitely seems to be like some mismanagement, misappropriation of resources, a lack of preparation, despite the fact that you live in a state where these things happen
Yeah.
regularly. But I also think those things are topographical. Like that's the meaning, like that's just trying to, it's not the main issue. It's like trying to treat the symptoms and not the cause, if that
The
makes
cause.
sense.
That's the focus, the
Yeah,
cause.
and the causes I think is a much bigger, much more complex, collective kind of thing that's going on with regards to there's variables that we don't have any control over, like weather patterns or wind, or how wind comes from here and goes here, and how it's really dry there. Like it's just what it is, like in that geographic area. I think the real issue that people are pushing up against is like, does it make sense to, like, are certain areas becoming the type of areas that long term, probably not in mine and your lifetime, but maybe in the next like 30, 40, 50 years, where people reconsider actually living there because of things that we don't have control over, like weather patterns, like temperature, like like really strong, aggressive, whether it be hurricanes or fires or things of that nature. Because, if you think about it over time, like if you look at a map of Florida 20,000 years ago, the majority of it was underwater. And in its current state is a relatively like newer thing. You know what I'm saying? And just because something hasn't happened in our lifetime doesn't mean it's never going to happen. So I think, yeah, like those issues that people are getting really upset about, that get a lot of clicks and a lot of people paying attention, uh, it's just kind of noise in the sense that it's not the actual issue itself. It's like the kind of treating the symptom and not the problem.
Yeah. What I was thinking about it is, and somebody hopefully watching this will uh, think about something. So when we had the last fire, I actually went on Chat GPT and I was like, hey, like if I wanted to build a business around preventing fires,
Yeah.
not actually treating the symptom, like to prevent them, how would I go about doing that? And what kind of came to the surface is, those little vacuum cleaners that are like a little robot. You turn them on, and then they start vacuuming your entire place, and then they keep it maintained.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, as we enter the era of robots,
Yeah.
right? How cool would it be if there was robots that actually maintain the areas that are high prone for water, and basically almost like that little machine that basically vacuums like robots that maintain these areas and basically help maintain it to make it less prone for water. I don't know what they would do exactly,
Yeah.
but and then I asked it, I said, can you give me an image of what that would look like? And it gave me different images. And the image that I liked was almost like a tarantula style robot,
Yeah.
where it's got the ability to go up and down mountains, basically, to either remove some of the
Debris.
debris and maybe even keep it a little bit more moist or whatever it is. But that's kind of the image that it gave me. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh
So
man,
yeah. So in
somebody's got to come up with that
Yeah, and I
one day.
think that's like a technological advanced way to treat the symptom. And when as you were saying that to me, it's like, yeah, maybe that.
The symptom or the cause?
Well, the symptom, because like the cause is that geographic area is just prone. That's what it is, and we can't change like weather patterns or temperature or like those things. So we just have to like, hey, if we want to live here, we have to just prevent that, be proactive and attempt to prevent that from happening. And what came up for me is like, let's say your tarantula things plus drones plus like robot firefighters who actually go in, you know what I mean, during the storm. I mean, in those situations where us humans have limitations, because firefighters are like heroes, man, when they walk in there and do that sort of thing. And, I have all the respect in the world for them. I'm aware though that they're human and they're limited in their capacity. So having like a humanoid robot that is temperature resistant, that can go in and do whatever it does to try to tamp it down and stop it from happening. So it's a combination of like preventative mixed with, okay, if it does break out, can technology help us to put it out faster?
Faster, basically.
Yeah. But ultimately all of this, the reason why we're having this like futuristic conversation is like, just like it affects real estate. It just does. And if you're in an area where, these things happen or are happening more frequently, I think in Florida we had, I don't know, 3 big hurricanes this year, and they're increasing in their intensity and their size and how quick that they get really big, where it used to take longer because, in that geographic area in the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico, it's just warmer. And as a result, they get bigger faster. You can go from a category 1 to a category 4 in like a day. That's crazy, dude. I've lived in Florida my whole life. Like usually that's a whole long progression that would take like a week, happens in like 24 hours. And a 4 is like you leave if you have the capacity to leave. It's a sustained tornado for like 8 hours. You know what I mean? Like it's wild.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah. And these are all kind of, I don't know, considerations. And it's affecting in our geographic area, specifically in Florida and California. It's affecting affordability. It's affecting insurance, which affects affordability. So
yeah,
just things to be like aware of and to help clients to navigate. I do think that we have a tendency to, humans just resist change unless there's a lot of pain, unless they're kind of forced to. So I don't see this like mass exodus of people. Just like, all right, forget it, man. I'm out of here. But I do think that it's here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere in terms of like insurance being an issue, and fire insurance or flood insurance in Florida, or, you know what I mean? Like wind insurance. Like I know people who own properties, like short-term rentals. And if they had to have insurance on them, if they didn't have them free and clear, they wouldn't make sense financially. They just wouldn't, because the cost is too high, so yeah, I think truthfully, our state is becoming California. It's like over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of cost and everything. It used to be like way more. I don't want to sound like the old grandpa and stuff, but like not that long ago, I was selling homes for like, I don't know, 250 grand, $300,000.
Now they're like 700.
Oh yeah,
600.
all day long, 650, 700. And like, most people don't earn enough money to be able to, maintain that. And that doesn't include the insurance and all that other stuff. So
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So I guess as we have this conversation, let's just triangulate a little bit with the time that we have left. Like, what, if you are in like this type of area, like, what do you think agents can be doing to really serve their community best? Not only during something like this happening, but also just in general.
Yeah. Um, what I would say is just reaching out to people and just basically saying like, "Hey, look, is there anything that you need?" So like we had the mountain fire, and what we started doing is clients that we knew that were in those areas, we would reach out to them and just say, "Hey, look, like, how's everything coming? Like, is there anything we can help you out with? Like, do you need anything? If you have resources like moving truck, dump trucks, whatever you have." I know even in some cases, some of the fire victims were looking for like clothes and stuff, like simple necessities, bro. Like, hey, my son wears five size shoe, or my kid wears a medium shirt, or whatever, like just a very simple necessity. So I think that anything that you can do personally to reach out, to post on like, hey, look, if you guys need anything, like if you have any excess of anything, or even if you don't have any excess of something but you feel like giving, you've got extra sweaters, extra jackets, extra anything, just be like, hey, look, I've got medium size this, or shoes, any extra canned food that you may have. And then as a real estate agent, obviously we have access to like housing as well too. So like if somebody's looking for a place to rent and you know somebody has a place that they like to offer, um, connecting those two with people that need places to rent. I saw one of the realtors from Selling Sunset, and he actually posted like, look, if you need housing for rent, we will forego our commission and basically help you find a place to rent at no cost. And his logic was, this is the time for us to serve our community. So I think anything that you can do to serve your community at this point, I think would be extremely, extremely helpful to individuals, and just reaching out to people and just obviously like seeing what they need. A lot of it's going to be clothes, food. In some cases, I've even seen like GoFundMe accounts start to rise up to help them find alternative. I'm sure that there's going to be people that don't have insurance in our area. There was people that had their properties paid off that were just like, hey, look, like I don't need insurance. I've got my property paid off. Why would I have insurance? Because whenever you have a loan, the lender requires the insurance, but whenever you have your property paid off, nobody requires you to have insurance. So I think that those people are probably going to need some sort of financial assistance in some way, shape, or form
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. So,
And then providing content as well too. So like I remember during one of the fires, I had an insurance carrier, and I said,
mm,
okay, like how do I have the conversation, like an insurance adjuster? So I had an insurance claim adjuster and said, okay, like how does somebody go about filing a fire claim? What does that look like? I think that's going to be one of the things that a lot of people need help with, just because insurance companies' job is not just to hand out like, oh, like you think your property was worth $10 million? Oh, here's a $10 million check. No, they're going to look for loopholes. They're going to look for things to try to void out the claim or try to make the claim as little as possible. So sometimes, in some cases, even having an insurance adjuster interview or insurance claim adjuster where you interview them and like, hey, look, what are the next steps for people to contact their insurance companies, and how does somebody make sure that they maximize their claim as well too? Having some sort of potential representation
yeah.
as
So this
well.
is great. So one is, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it goes a long way, bro. Like, just reaching out, like a phone call,
Yeah.
really with the intention of just recognizing that people are experiencing something that is, pretty difficult, and really with the goal and objective of just seeing if you can help in some way. I've seen some agents in that area. They set up like donation centers, so like at their office, where they can have
Yeah.
people kind of coming in and dropping stuff off, and then if you need anything, you can just go there and get it. Checking in with any clients in your database who you know own properties there, whether they're secondary homeowners or primary homeowners, and just touching base, texting them, maybe even uh, a like a bomb, like a video, just letting them know, like, hey, thinking about you. Let me know if you need anything. And then to your point, like the type of content, that's what I was telling Angel's guy is like, yeah, having insurance people on, having adjusters on, having anybody in that space that can give some very specialized knowledge, right? Because I'm aware like these things when they pop up, we usually don't know a lot about them. And very quickly, we need to gather as much information as we can so we can make an informed decision in terms of what makes the most sense. So having, people on your platforms or types of media that you could be pushing out or pushing out to people's phones because they may not have computers, but pushing them out to their phone or their email, um, that could be helpful or useful to them in some way.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that that's right on the money, so to speak.
Now, what I did want to say is one of the things that whenever you drive by some of these locations that have been affected in the past before, you start seeing signs like be careful of scammers.
Mm.
So a lot of times what happens when these fires happen is you get people that are pretending to be contractors promising somebody like, hey, I can have your home rebuilt within 6 months. Hey, I can have your house rebuilt within a year. And the reality of it is that they can't make a promise like that. And the reason is that it's not all in their hands, but they'll collect these huge deposits. Like, hey, look, like in order for us to get started on this, I'm going to contact an architect. Give me $100,000 as a deposit for in order for me to get started. And what starts to happen whenever these types of situations is lots of scams.
Mm.
So, what I would recommend is be aware that there's going to be predators coming to you, preying on your weaknesses, meaning your hope and dreams to rebuild your property. And they are going to tell you everything that you want to hear in the hopes of scamming you from 50, 100, 200, $300,000. Just be aware that these types of things exist. Educate yourself on the building process, knowing that it's not a fast process, talking to different people that have been through this experience. Like I have clients that rebuilt their properties 5 years later. So reaching out. So if you guys need any sort of advice like that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you guys, but just know that there's going to be people preying on um, on vulnerable people, um, hoping to scam people out of 50, 100, 200, 300, four or $500,000. So just be very, very aware of that. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about was just like the aftermath as to like what happens after the long term. So if you look back at the um, Thomas fire, um, what ended up happening is when people did rebuild, it actually helped out the neighborhood in terms of prices because whenever people were rebuilding, they're building these amazing, amazing houses. Like, so if you look at some of the areas like the Ondolando area in Ventura that was affected by the Thomas fire, like the houses that were rebuilt were very modern, very beautiful, and with amazing views. So imagine like homes being built in the 60s, they're completely different than a home built in 2023, 2024. So what I actually started seeing is that some of the homes that were being rebuilt actually over time increased the values to make it a even more expensive of a neighborhood to live in. So now some of the homes that are being rebuilt were $2, $3, $4 million properties because of the way that they were rebuilt and the size of and the square footage of it, and they were even reshaped to have better views as well too, and just a lot more thoughtful architecture as well too. So just know that long term, over the next 5 to 7 years, some of the properties that will be rebuilt will be these amazing, beautiful homes on there, and that over time that will help the the neighborhood. Short term, like if you have a home that made it, it'll be impacted a little bit. Meaning, like short term, people are going to be like, "Hey, I don't know if I want to live in this neighborhood right after a fire." But long term, 5 to 7 years out, it'll actually help out that neighborhood. Another thing that I made a note, and I think that for whatever reason I'm having trouble seeing Aaron. I think that he forgot to pay his Wi-Fi bill. So if you guys want to start a GoFundMe for Aaron, feel free to start it so I make sure he pays for the Wi-Fi. I'm just kidding. The other thing that I was thinking was just of insurance companies, how some insurance companies are not deciding to operate in certain states, certain jurisdictions, certain areas. The thing that pops in my head is just how accurate of data insurance companies have. Like, I think there's this gentleman by the name of Gary Brecka, one of the founders of 10X Health, and he was talking about that insurance companies would almost be able to tell you down to the month when somebody's life expectancy was. And when insurance carriers are deciding not to renew certain policies or exit certain policies, is because the data that they have is basically indicating to them that these are higher risk policies where the risk to reward ratio doesn't make sense financially to them. So, yeah, that's the thought that comes into my head as it relates to that. Another thought that came into my head is, um, for myself, I did have a neighbor that had a second house burned down. She had the Woolsey fire burn down one of her properties, and then the mountain fire burned down another of her properties. And they asked me, like, why do you think it is? Do you think it's luck? Do you think it's just like, oh, she has bad luck that she's had two properties burned down? And my response to that wasn't, it's not luck. It's just you have a certain criteria of properties that you like, and those properties have certain characteristics. And one of the characteristics that you have is that you like properties with views. And unfortunately, properties with views are more prone to have fire damage. So it's not that you have bad luck. It's more or less that you like a certain type of property, and that certain type of property is more likely to have fire damage. So cool. I don't believe Aaron's going to be coming back on. So we appreciate your time. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the share button. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Also, if you are not signed up for the Do More Deals Summit, that is something that you don't want to miss. Being in events have changed our life. The QR code is right there on the lower right hand or lower left hand corner. So make sure to scan that right now. So attending events changed my life. That's where I met Aaron Novello at an event. That's where I met Angel Garcia at another event. Some of the best relationships that I have been outside of the people that I currently know. And I have met these people through events. So there's going to be some very powerful people in the room. It's going to be a smaller environment. So if you have not bought your tickets, buy them now. Appreciate you guys, and make it a great day. Talk to you guys soon. Later. Peace.